Hello and welcome to episode 346 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick here, as always, with
Jason Rabinowitz. Hello, Ian. Welcome to the 346th episode, or as we're going to call it, the A340-600 Spectacular.
Indeed. As we are preparing for this momentous occasion, we have later in the show John Walton, who is professionally the editor-in-chief of the Upfront, a in-cabin focused publication about all of the things that are happening inside the aircraft in the sky. But we've got him on today because John is probably the foremost aficionado, civilian expert on the A340-600. And it's a most interesting airplane and a microcosm of how things got developed back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So we'll talk about that.
You might even learn a thing or two.
We might even learn a thing or two. I know I did. So we'll talk with John in just a little bit. But first, we begin in Washington with the Federal Aviation Administration withdrawing its order mandating cancellations at the Focus 40 airports. I didn't know these particular airports had a name, but they do in fact.
Well, now we know, and we're going to use it forever.
Yeah. So I knew that there was the Core 30, which are the Core 30 airport. I mean, these aren't inventive names in the National Airspace System, but there's an expanded list of 40 airports. The FAA apparently did not choose these. There was a method, a pre-method for choosing these 40 airports, and they're called the Focus 40. So now we know. But all of that is gone as the FAA says everything's back to normal following the end of the government shutdown. Air traffic controllers can go back to being overworked, but paid. We're back to where we were before the shutdown, which is still thousands too few controllers in the US, mandatory overtime, and 6-day work weeks.
With certainty that they're going to get paid for like at least 2 months until maybe we do this all over again.
Yeah, not to be too down on things, but January looms as far as another government shutdown is concerned. Though there has been a bill introduced, bipartisan bill, in fact, to ensure that air traffic controllers and other safety critical FAA employees are paid during any future government shutdowns. I'm not sure if the government will shut down before that bill gets passed.
Yeah. To the person, at least one of you, who wrote in after last week's episode and said, do you Americans know that this is a ridiculous way to run things? Yes, we are well aware. Unfortunately, Ian and I cannot do anything about this individually, but we are all keenly aware of how ridiculous this is. So, but thank you for pointing that out.
So no more flight restrictions in time for Thanksgiving. Airlines have said that they're ready to ramp back up and have indeed ramped back up to where they were before the shutdown. So Thanksgiving travel, if it is busy, if it is stressful, it will just be the normal amount of busy and stressful and not a particularly terrible version of busy and stressful. However, let's stick with the National Airspace System for just a moment and talk about some developments that have come out within the past week. Jason, we've talked a few times about the forced relocation of certain air traffic controllers from a Long Island facility to Philadelphia as a way to improve the airspace flow into New York airports.
Oh, yeah, it's gone really poorly.
I was going to kind of do this little sarcastic thing where I'd lead up and discuss how it's all gone great.
No, we're beyond that. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, it hasn't gone well. And it's going to perhaps continue to not go well for a little longer. The FAA says, hey, controllers that we told we're going to move you, then we're going to hire a bunch of people, you're going to train them, and then you can go back to Long Island. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah, because apparently the FAA is asking some of them to stay longer. So the situation, as I understand it, could get worse at this point, unless the FAA steps in and forces these controllers to increase the duration of their temporary relocation down to Philly. If they leave Philly and go back to Long Island, there's going to be even fewer controllers for the Newark sector in Philly than there are today, which doesn't seem workable to me. So I hope there is some significant financial incentive that they are offering to these controllers.
There are significant financial incentives being offered in this case to those folks. That said, the target that they were trying to reach is why they're trying to extend the controller stay in Philadelphia. They were at 52% of their staffing target when they asked these folks to move. They're today at 54%.
Oh, it's only been how long since they moved down there?
Yeah, it's been a few years now. It'll be 2 years in July of 2026. So in exchange for sticking around in Philadelphia longer, they get per diem benefits, extra per diem benefits, a waiver that allows them to basically transfer to any air traffic control facility they want to when they're done with working at Philadelphia.
There's going to be a glut of people moving from Philly to, let's say, Phoenix? Jacksonville? Actually, Jacksonville could really use controllers. They're also chronically understaffed. I don't know. If you want to escape Long Island, because you can go anywhere you want, where would you go? I only made it as far as Brooklyn. I'm okay with that. But, I heard we have an entirely new air traffic control system coming any minute now. Unfortunately, it turns out that that's not true, is it?
Well, it's not entirely true because, as often happens with big, large, grandiose announcements, once you start digging into the things, you have to scale back your ambition a little bit. And as it turns out, the announcement that this brand new air traffic control system will be in place in just a few years, that won't necessarily include a replacement of the common automation platform, which is a key component of the air traffic control system. So that was reported last week first by the Air Current, and today, Wednesday the 19th of November, FAA Administrator Brian Bedford confirmed that they will not fully replace that key component. So it'll be new, it'll be better, we hope, but it won't be entirely new the way it was talked about when this was first brought up.
Okay. I look forward to them swapping out the 5.25 floppy drives for like a 256 megabyte flash drive. I don't know, whatever they're doing.
Zip drives. They're moving to zip drives.
Zip 100.
Yes.
Those aren't known for being terrible. So, hey, that's moving in the right direction. Talk about something entirely different before we talk to John and just all about happy things and A340-600. Let's go to Dubai, where things are, I would say, unexpectedly spicy. There is a lot going on, and I did not see it coming.
There is a glut of orders. And coming from all the airlines you would expect to order aircraft at the Dubai Airshow, but also some surprise orders.
And it's usually like a battle between like Airbus dominates or Boeing dominates, or some years nobody dominates and nothing happens. But this year it feels even like punches are being traded here. I like it.
I like it too. Let's get into it. So we've broken things down by the airline orders because they've just been so across the board. I think it's more helpful to put them into airline. So one of the most interesting collection of orders, I think, this week was from Emirates, the home airline for the Dubai Airshow. Not only did they order some things, they also are driving some future order activity, perhaps.
Into existence.
Yes. Doing their very best. So let's talk about what actually exists right now, and then we'll go from there. So they added 8 A350-900s to their order book, so 73 in total, 65 more 777-9s.
Yep, that 7 was just an errant 7 from when you spilled your drink on your keyboard. It's actually 65
777-9s.
Which is a lot. And you have Emirates has more than 300 Boeing wide bodies on order, including the 777X, 787, and 777 freighter. That is a lot of airplanes. But you know what? Boeing, apparently as leverage for potentially ordering these aircraft, has willed into existence the potential of a feasibility study of a stretch of the still yet to be certified 777X, which could potentially in the future be dubbed the 777-10.
I mean, in a two-class configuration, it would seat about 450 passengers.
Which sounds like a lot, but I guess compared to its A380, yeah.
It's a little less than 100 fewer, than the A380, but it also, I guess, burns less fuel would be one of the things that would make it more attractive. But also, they need to replace these eventually.
Yes, it's been talked about before, apparently as far back as 2016, where according to Flight Global, the 777X-10 was apparently, quote, pretty straightforward. I think that's the old Boeing talking in 2016, because I don't think the new Boeing in 2025 would say anything. It's pretty straightforward. But I guess if it really is just making a couple of the seconds a little bit longer and adding a couple rows of seats, not the end of the world, but it really just shows that some airlines like Emirates just have an outsized influence on the future of airframers. It's kind of incredible that they could just will into existence an airplane that does not exist right now.
Yeah, we'll see if it makes sense. The key thing here is going to be, does the airframe need rework beyond just stretching it? And do modifications need to be made to the GE9X engines in order to power that aircraft?
Yeah, that could be interesting.
That's why we get our feasibility study.
Yeah, which they fully support. It's funny, the Boeing press release doesn't mention anything about this, but the Emirates press release says, we fully support Boeing's feasibility study to develop the 777-10 and have options to convert our latest 777-9 order to the 777-10 or the 777-8. Yeah, Emirates is really throwing around their weight and not only saying like, hey, you're going to do this study, but like, hey, maybe we're going to convert our current orders to this if you do it.
Well, we'll see what happens. Yeah. Let's stick in the neighborhood and go to younger, smaller cousin Fly Dubai, where they have...
Do this in reverse order. Start with the surprising news.
Okay, I will start with the surprising news. So for the first time, Fly Dubai has ordered Airbus aircraft. They signed a memorandum of understanding for 150 A321neos. This is a pretty big shift from having an all-Boeing fleet, considering they just bought a ton of 737 MAX, bought the 787 for the first time, and in this air show also signed a memorandum of understanding for 75 737 MAX plus 75 options. So a ton of aircraft. But Fly Dubai is looking at the 737-10 or the lack thereof, really, saying, well, there's an aircraft that does the job we need it to do. So we'll buy 150
And it does
of those.
it now. And it does it right now. So this came in, and I said, talk about the Airbus order first, because this actually was a two-part announcement. In the Airbus order came out a day before, at least a day before, if not 2 days before, the Boeing order. And this was kind of industry shaking that Fly Dubai would break from Boeing, who's only had...
I wouldn't say as surprising as, say, Southwest or Ryanair ordering,
but it's a massive Airbus. It's a massive shift. People were really, really looking at this and saying, "Wow, Fly Dubai must really, really be unhappy with Boeing," and it is. But then, a day later, they ordered an equivalent amount of Boeing aircraft. So
keeping everybody happy.
They stayed relevant in the news for 2 days rather than one. And that was probably the goal. But what else happened? There was a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Stay in the region.
Wrapping up Fly Dubai news, they selected the GE9X for their 787-9s, which they ordered at last year's show. Sticking around the region as well, Gulf Air firmed its 787 order, while increasing the firm order from 12 to 15. So that is an additional 3 aircraft that they are absolutely going to take. Etihad is interesting in that they're adding A330neos. They signed an order with Airbus directly for 6 A330neos. They'll take an additional 9 on lease from Avalon.
But they're not done.
But they're not done. They also signed for 7 more A350-1000s and 3 A350 freighters. Now, the A350-1000 is really interesting to me, the order here, because Emirates has resisted the A350-1000. They say, especially Sir Tim Clark has said, I'm underwhelmed by the Trent XWB-97.
Didn't he call them defective?
Yeah, he doesn't like them. And Rolls has done a whole lot of work to basically convince Sir Tim Clark, please order the A350-1000. That said, Abu Dhabi and Dubai are not that far from each other.
No, some might even say they should share one single airport.
So I don't understand that argument. Like obviously you have a real world use case. And Qatar also has the A350-1000, which, again, not that far away. So is Dubai that much dustier? Is the sand that much grittier in Dubai versus Abu Dhabi and Doha? I don't know. Or is there something else going on here? Which
there's always something else.
Something else going on. Staying in the Gulf, we have Riyadh Air picking the Leap 1A for its A321neos and the GE NX for its 787s. So a pretty big show for GE Aerospace /CFM /Sinemca all of the joint venture partners for all of these engines. So a pretty big Dubai Air Show for all of them.
But we're not done.
We're not done. We're gonna leave Middle East Airlines and we're gonna talk about, let's say, Silkway West, Jason. They've ordered another pair of A350 freighters, bringing their total, doubling their order to 4.
Hey, that's nice. I really just associate them with 747-8Fs. I don't know why, but their livery is going to look nice on an A350.
Yes, it will.
Let's go to Ethiopian, though.
6 A350-900s, adding to a fleet of 22 already. And they ordered 11, or optioned 11 more 737-8 MAX. Those are available options from their 2023 Dubai Airshow order.
Now, I can't remember who exactly owns what part or what percentage of Air Europa right now, but whoever does own Air Europa, they will now be the proud holder of a memorandum of understanding for 40 A350-900s, which is a pretty sizable order for Air Europa.
It's a sizable order, and
that's pretty big.
It's a pretty big defection away from the 787.
It is, but remember, Air Europa came from the roots of being an A330 operator before it moved to the 787. So really, it's kind of back to Airbus for Air Europa. But we're still not done. What did Air Senegal do?
But wait, there's more. Air Senegal placed an unfirmed order for 9 737 MAX 8, which is the airline's if firmed, would be the airline's largest single order ever. The interesting thing here is this would put Air Senegal from Dakar, range to fly to secondary European airports, which is what they're targeting. So they would be able to avoid all of the congestion and fees at major airports and bring people down to Senegal. So that's an interesting play there. We'll see if they firm that order soon.
And there's one more. That I didn't even know that this airline existed. But if you need to go to Libya, you might do so in the future on a Barak Air A320neo, who signed an order for 10.
They sure did.
Don't know what kind of 320neo family aircraft. Maybe they'll be weird and take an A319neo. We don't know. Hey, that'd be cool. But a little airline ordering a 10 320neo family aircraft. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And to round out the Dubai Airshow news, this was a bit on the sidelines, but it's still good news. Embraer says it expects the geared turbofan groundings to be done by the end of 2026 for the E2s. So this is just yes. This is just the Pratt & Whitney 1900. So the version of the geared turbofan engine that powers just the E2s. Embraer seems to be quite confident that Pratt & Whitney has gotten it right. They've ramped up MRO space, which has really cut down on the time that the engine is spending off the wing. And they seem to be very pleased with all of the new engines that are coming out of the factory.
I hope they're right. I
I hope
really
they're right
do.
too. Now we just need to expand that to
Everyone else.
the 1100 and the 1500, and people can stop cannibalizing A321neos and A220s.
Okay, let's put everything we just talked about, future things and fancy airplanes and really high-tech engines, and forget all that. Let's talk about the A340-600, decidedly not a next-generation aircraft. But John Walton, who we've talked to a number of times on this podcast, and we've alluded to the fact that he is a huge fan of the A340-600. We are going to do a deep dive onto the history of the aircraft, its kind of lore, what purpose it served, what purpose it still serves today, and I don't know, just talk to a good friend of ours.
There you go. Stay with us. We will be right back with John Walton. Welcome back. We are now joined by John Walton as promised. By day, John is the editor-in-chief of the leading passenger experience news, The Upfront, at theupfront.media. By night, or by other parts of the day, perhaps, John is the world's most learned human being when it comes to the A340-600, an aficionado.
Yeah, John, welcome back. This has been kind of a running, not very good joke on this show where, it's the 320 episode. We'll talk about the 320, but now it's the 346th episode. We're legitimizing this joke by having you, the world's greatest A340. I don't want to call you a historian, but maybe
aficionado, historian, maven. I would also take, absolutely.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is 100% my hashtag fave plane, and has been since it started flying. There's something about it, something about the proportions, the wide body, 4 massive engines. I mean, it's almost absurdly long to a point that we won't see again unless Emirates' plan for the 777-10 becomes a reality,
which maybe we talked about right before this segment.
Exactly,
we haven't just recorded that yet, but yeah, sure.
From a passenger point of view, it's great to flying because it's got that A340 and A330 and A310 and A300 242 seat layout in economy. I spent a lot of the early to mid 2000s living in London in Hammersmith, looking south towards those usual Heathrow arrival tracks. And just sort of watching these enormous beasts sort of elegantly descending, floating back to Earth. That's where I fell in love with them. And then ever since, I have just been collecting more and more and more of them. I think I counted that I have 25 models in my house, 25 unique models in my house across the various operators that did and didn't exist. I have a Coca-Cola livery one.
Sure, who doesn't?
For some reason. Hey, Pepsi had a Concorde. Coca-Cola had an A340-600, and that's
it feels like a reversal of the usual Pepsi knocking off Coke things, but that's an interesting twist. But let's give a tight history of what the heck is the A340, especially the A340-600. Like, what is it based off of? What did it come from? Most importantly, what problem was it trying to solve?
Yeah, okay. So in historical terms, there's sort of 4 things about the A340 are important to know. So one is that it was a really easy development from the existing A340, and thus, again, the 330, 310, 300, the original Airbus widebody, right? The second thing is that it was a set of replacement aircraft for the early 747s, plus being a competitor to the 777-200 and 300, the non-ER versions. Airbus's defense against the 777, which, for the airlines that bought it, actually worked. Number 3 is ETOPS, which we'll come on to. And number 4 is that it was a sort of high-capacity option for Airbus between sort of the first A340, which we would now call a small to medium-sized widebody, and the A380, long before the A350 was in the picture, even as the original sort of A350 that eventually became the A330neo.
So, John, how long was the A340-600 kind of Airbus's highest capacity option for?
Yeah, so it really, between its introduction into service in 2002 all the way to when the A380 arrived, what's 5-6 years later. But sort of fundamentally, it was also the aircraft in the middle of the Airbus family. If you didn't need to go for the A380, like a lot of airlines didn't, and to an extent, or still don't, the A340-600 was your replacement for your early 747s, right? So your 747-100s, 200s, which were if you remember, like not actually retired by a lot of airlines until the very late 1990s and in some cases early 2000s, right? I mean, British Airways didn't retire its 100 fleet, the 747-100s, until 1999, after entering into service in 1974, right? I didn't go to school for math, but that's 25 years. Similarly, the 200s were into service into the 2000s. And having that ability to, deliver very similar aircraft in terms of passenger size and also importantly cargo capacity, because the length of the aircraft and the way that they configured the cargo hold was really important for Airbus, and actually not a massive development effort either, right? Today we might think of it as almost being a sort of A340neo in terms of development.
Ooh, interesting. Because, the 340, 200, 300, as we know, very, very different power on those aircraft, or lack of power, I guess. The 500, 600 is a completely different ballgame. But it's interesting talking about cargo, and this is something that we'll come full circle with in a little bit. But it's even something that the A380 is not well known for, cargo capacity. It actually has pretty sad cargo capacity. So I do wonder how many airlines that factored into in keeping the A340-600 kind of being delivered, when some airlines would have gone with the A380, but its lack of cargo capacity compared to the 346 was just a showstopper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at who bought the 340-600, right? Like Lufthansa bought 24, Virgin Atlantic bought 19, Iberia bought 18. Everyone else is in single digits, right? But those three, to start with, for sure, have massive cargo requirements, right? Elsewhere down there, you got South African Airways, again, big cargo carrier to South Africa. Etihad, Thai, China Eastern, Qatar, right? Like all these airlines will have and indeed did make the most of the frankly enormous amount of cargo capacity that's available, even just under in the cargo area, without even talking about the new main deck cargo in the sort of post-COVID cargo conversions that have been done.
So we alluded to this a little bit, but let's talk about who the operators were for the A340-600, because it's kind of wide range. There's Lufthansa at the top, because, of course, I just learned at this very moment that they actually had 8 200s at one point. Did not know that. They are by far the most prolific A340-600 operator. They had 24 and still have a lot of those still in service today. Virgin Atlantic, as you mentioned, but there are some interesting ones out there. Who is your, outside of Virgin Atlantic, who is your favorite use case of the A340-600?
Favorite use case? I mean, I once flew at this gorgeous daytime flight from Sydney to Abu Dhabi, and it was actually for the unveiling of the Etihad A380 back in.
Well, that's ironic.
Right, sort of back in 2012 or something, and just this stunning sort of late westbound afternoon flight over Australia, the sort of wide red land out of the window, and it's just really beautiful. And sort of doing that and being able to see those enormous engines out the window as well was really something. It was really something. There really is just something about the proportions of those engines. It's Da Vinci's master ratio, whatever it's called, right? That shell thing. There's something about it. It's just they're just fantastic. But it also, so in terms of sort of why a lot of airlines took it, is this sort of, again, early 747 replacements, a competitor to the early versions of the 777, and in many ways the Airbus defender against those aircraft, and it did work, right? If you think about it, Lufthansa didn't order the 777, Virgin Atlantic did not order the 777, Iberia didn't order the 777, South African didn't order the 777, and that's down to a number of things, including commonality, right? So commonality with early A340s, certainly flight deck commonality for sure, less so with the engines, right? The original CFM 56 hairdryers, no commonality at all. They're barely engines. those big old Trents, right? But in terms of what passengers can expect, the seats that you can put on the aircraft, right? And that's always been one of the valuable things about that common Airbus first generation wide body cross section, all the way from the 300, the 310, 330, 340. Second generation, third generation of those aircraft, right, is that you can take a row of 8 seats off the 340 or the business class seats off a 340, put it on a 330. If you wanted to, you could probably put it on a 310. I don't know if the seat tracks work the same. From an airline operations point of view, even knowing what we do now about ETOPS, which we'll come on to later, and the changing price of aviation fuel, even knowing that, there are operational benefits to having a single type of aircraft for flight crew, for maintenance, for cabin crew, and also for an airline like Virgin, which operated sort of alongside each other for a long time. The early A340s, so their 300s and their 600s, means they could sort of change gauge seasonally or across the week without having to change their entire crew section, right? So whereas if you were operating the 777, you couldn't roster the same pilots on there. Offering the 340, the 600 or 300, you absolutely could.
Right. So before we get to ETOPS, a serious conversation, another jokey question, but not really. What was your favorite special livery on an A340-600, and why was it Etihad's special Formula One livery?
It 1000% was not. My favorite livery on there is the famous fart door.
Oh, was that an Airbus House livery?
That was the Airbus House livery.
I'm not sure if that
original
one was special or like air quoting special.
It sure was something. So, in case you haven't seen it, and I hope you'll be able to put
we will find an image that does this justice and put a link in the show notes.
So this was probably at some air show or at Toulouse or something, right, where Airbus was shopping around the aircraft. It was one of the prototype or testbed aircraft, and they'd sort of written some marketing guff across the aircraft, right? But obviously they hadn't done it with somebody either with a us level of sense of humor or what, because on the right hand side of the aircraft. It was written, longer, larger, farther, faster, right? Except that door 4, right, so the one immediately behind the wing on the right-hand side of the aircraft,
this is so good,
contained the HER of farther, and it opened forwards. So you'll also have seen longer, larger, fart.
I mean...
Just...
Yeah, you're right. This is better than Etihad's Formula One A346 livery. You are not wrong.
I have to say the Formula One is, I think, my favorite intentional livery. Let's go with that.
The Coca-Cola model one that I have is also pretty great. My favorite part of that is that they've just written Coke on it, not even Coca-Cola. And I'm like, there's not a lack of fuselage to put some writing on here, people. Like,
it has got to be the world's longest billboard, perhaps, at this point.
Yeah, well, second long. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only commercial aircraft longer than it is the 747-8.
Right now,
and that's only by a very little bit. Until Tim Clark gets his request from Boeing by ordering yet more 777Xs.
So let's go back to ETOPS and Virgin Atlantic's famous dig at, anyone that wasn't Virgin Atlantic. But give us some of the background there and why this mattered in that era.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So you've got to sort of head back to the 80s to really start to think about ETOPS, right? When you started getting the first twin-engined wide-bodies, right? So the 767, the A300, and really the A310 in terms of the range that we're looking at here. So ETOPS, which stands for either engines turning or passengers swimming, or extended range twin engine operations, various things that sound sort of like that over its time, basically means that there are government restrictions, regulatory restrictions on how far a twin engine aircraft can fly from a diversion airport, open diversion airport indeed, that it's able to access, before you have to sort of say, actually, no, you can only be within 120 minutes of that flight if one engine goes out, so you're running on one engine and so on. So that originally started at ETOPS 120, so that would be 2 hours of flying on one engine. Then that developed into 180, so that's 3 hours. That originally required 1 full year of problem-free operations of ETOPS 120. So you had to be, you had to have basically run that first. The thing is that the first ETOPS 180 aircraft was the original 777 in 1995 when it entered into service. Boeing managed to persuade the FAA to do ETOPS 180 entry into service in 95, but not the JAA, which was the European precursor to EASA, who insisted on going back to this sort of ETOPS 120 for 1 year, then you can sort of graduate to ETOPS 180. And then for many years, like for over a decade at that point, ETOPS 180 was the maximum you could get, which for quite a lot of routes, particularly sort of trans-Pacific routes, some sort of Southern Atlantic routes, that created problems, right? Because there's only a certain amount of diversion airports you can go to. Go to a site like the Great Circle Mapper at gcmap.com and play around with the sort of ETOPS clicky buttons, and you'll sort of see, if you put a route in, about exactly where the sort of ETOPS dead zones are, right? And then ETOPS 180 Plus only started being available in 2007, which of course was 6 years after the first flight of the A340-600. So Airbus basically was in there saying, look, we've got an aircraft that can ignore ETOPS, because it's got 4 engines, that will replace your 747, that will have cockpit commonality with your existing A340s and A330s. So you don't need to order this 777, and and also it'll be a great stopgap because you'll also have cockpit commonality with the A380 that we're building. So that was their thing, and sort of as we move on there, that sort of high capacity option between the sort of smaller A340s and then the A330-300 and the A380 before the A350 was in the picture was absolutely really important for Airbus. People say, we do have a high capacity wide body when they were selling aircraft.
And was Virgin Atlantic's whole 4 engines for long haul slogan, was that kind of done by the time they got to the 346, or was that still a thing that they were very much reminding passengers of, hey, we've got 4 engines. This is a purpose-built long-haul aircraft, or was it really sorted at that point?
I wouldn't bet on it, but I'm pretty sure that I've seen those sort of 4 engines, 4 long-haul stickers or decals on the 600. So they were still going on with that, hashtag 4 engines, 4 long haul slogan that they were using well into the operation of the A340-600. It was nonsense, to be honest, certainly for any route that BA was competing with Virgin on, right? I mean, the North Atlantic does not need ETOPS.
But it was still a point of pride that really the A340-600, short of the A380, was the last bastion of 4 engines is a necessary requirement for flights of this stage length. So it was still, I guess, to them, nothing more than a marketing point, but an impactful one, I think.
I don't know how many people were really impacted by it.
Well, it worked on you,
I guess. I mean, that wasn't why I love the aircraft, but it's certainly an ongoing joke between all of our pals, right? So we remember it.
Let's talk about the, I don't want to say downfall, because that's not what happened here.
Graceful exit from the market.
Yeah, I mean, it's still sticking around. If you want an interesting statistic right now, there are an equal number of passenger aircraft operating for Lufthansa as there are cargo aircraft operating for European cargo, which is an interesting dynamic. And then the rest are those oddball passenger carriers like Conviasa, Mahan Air, and there is an Azerbaijan government one still sticking around, as well as a couple random Alpha Star based out of Saudi Arabia, and Universal Sky Carrier also has one that has flown.
It's definitely the aircraft, I wouldn't say of last resort, but the aircraft of kind of, hey, we got this aircraft lying around. You want to do something with it? And airlines do something with it.
The European cargo one is a really interesting operation, but I'll talk about the sort of Iranian and Venezuelan sort of sanctions busting aircraft. There's some really interesting stories about how those aircraft ended up in those places.
Oh, we've talked about that a number of times, and it keeps happening.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like the reason why they chose those aircraft is because they have existing commonality with other aircraft that they fly.
Just a couple decades later.
Yeah, but to be honest, if you've got someone who's already, if you've got a pilot who can already fly Airbus fly-by-wire of an A300, an A330, right? Because don't forget, I want to say Airbus delivered a small handful of modern A330s to Iran Air.
They did?
In that sort of brief period when the sanctions were lifted. So, if you're looking at cockpit commonality, if you're looking at parts commonality, that's the aircraft you swizzle your way into your country, I guess. The European cargo is a really interesting operation, right? And it sounds really weird for British people to say, oh yeah, the massive cargo operation, which is like saying, oh yeah, the enormous cargo operation at Coral Gables, Florida.
Of entirely wide-body 4-engined aircraft.
Yeah. If you take a look at the Google Maps or other satellite image of Bournemouth Airport, I'm not calling it International Airport, I'm sorry. There's just 3 A340-600s just sort of sitting there at the top of the now closed North Runway, which was probably only used for DC-3s back in the day. It's entirely preposterous that these enormous aircraft sort of based in Bournemouth. But so what happened was, as the major operators, right? So in this case, Virgin Atlantic and Iberia started retiring their A340s as they took some newer aircraft, particularly the A350 in both cases of the A350. That was accelerated by COVID, plus the then need for the Praetor, right? So the cargo combi passengerless passenger aircraft with a bunch of boxes plonked into the seats, or once the seats were pulled off into the sort of empty sort of seat tracks strapped down upper deck. And that's where European cargo really jumped into this market, right? It was that sort of Praetor market. So Praetor with a P, not Freighter with an F. During the height of lockdown, where PPE was in high demand, and so on and so forth. Afterwards, European cargo secured the conversion rights to basically turn that into a proper upper cargo door freighter. And the amount of cargo that you can now stick in an A340-600, which has a very high maximum takeoff weight, which is really useful, is enormous, right? It's I want to say it's more than a 747F because it's longer. Maybe not an 8F, but it's a huge amount of cargo that you can put in that aircraft. And yeah, it's obviously they were sold off fire sale prices. So yeah, if you can always see where the aircraft came from by whether it's got red engines or white engines. The red engines being the ones from Virgin and the white ones being the ones from Iberia. But yeah, they're still trucking, and I suspect they will for quite some time. That's a useful aircraft. It's an established aircraft. I suspect that the final knell will be, on the Lufthansa side, it's when the 777X is eventually introduced in, 2027 ?
Any day now.
Yeah. For the freighters, I think the rest of it will be, there'll be at some point at which some critical spare part is no longer available. There's a popular thing about, Lufthansa Technik having bought up every brake pad that they can find. I feel like a brake pad is a thing you can probably get as a third-party piece of MRO.
But it's a good quote,
right? Like that, it's a great quote. So, like, I love the idea that the thing that will sort of end this aircraft life is brake pads. I don't think it will be brake pads. It'll be sort of something else that nobody expects, probably. Like, I don't know, a sort of fuselage wiring frame. But again, you come back to the fact that actually this is just a really long A300 or A330, right? The only real difference is in the wing and some of the way that the aircraft is put together structurally. So, maybe there'll be some sort of issue with the wing that eventually exceeds maximum cycles.
So yeah, the Lufthansa also did say that at some point this aircraft was not meant to live forever, and it will hit a maximum number of hours, and they just can't overhaul it at that point anymore. Yeah. That seems a lot more likely than brake pads, but
again, I go back to the 747-100, right, which ran for over 25 years, which would mean this has the capability of going well into the 2030s.
There's one last thing. I don't know if this is the only time this has ever happened, if the A340-600 has the sole distinction of having an airframe written off due to an accident before it was ever actually delivered to anyone. A few of you are probably familiar with what I'm talking about, but there was the incident in 2007 where a yet-to-be-delivered Etihad A340-600 A6EHG having an engine run-up test in Toulouse, and there was an issue where some wheels weren't shocked, and it went right through a retaining wall and sound barrier, and the front bit kind of fell off, which is not great. No one was killed in that crash, fortunately. But yeah, an entire A340-600 written off because of a crash of an aircraft that never left the ground.
Yeah, I want to say it's still in the Virgin Atlantic training hall in Crawley. I still think they use that as their A330 training mock-up. Part of that aircraft.
There's history. This aircraft has got history. Some good, some not so good.
The picture of that is very much a meme.
It is indeed
terrible. There's some fairly drastic injuries, as you'd expect if very long aircraft mounts wall and nose bit falls off. I guess make sure the brakes are on properly before starting engines. Don't really know what to tell you.
Always good advice.
So the one thing we haven't talked about yet is the famous downstairs lavatories on the Lufthansa A340-600.
We did not forget that. I have it written down.
I heard you trying to break in. I heard you. So, John, what the heck are you talking about? As if I don't know. Tell me anyway.
So, if you didn't have enough seats on your A340-600, it came with the option of installing a set of lavatories in the cargo area downstairs. So Lufthansa was the only one to take them up on it for the A340-600, although Thomas Cook and I think maybe one other operator did for the A330. Real high passenger, low cargo operator, right? In the middle of the economy cabin on your Lufthansa A340-600, on the right-hand side of the aircraft in the center section, there are 3 or 4 rows of just 2 seats on the left-hand side of the middle section. On the right-hand side, there are stairs going downstairs to a place where you will find a bunch of lavatories. And that's where Lufthansa has installed the lavs for economy on the A340-600. Yeah.
I feel like this is a concept that is now so foreign that we will just never see this again in a commercial aircraft. However, I think it was a few years ago, maybe in 2022, I think it was Safran had some sort of concept for like a lower deck kind of napping room. I don't think I'm making this up, but I think that was a concept that they had.
So many airlines have a downstairs crew rest area. Or upstairs. Upstairs is a given, but quite a few have the downstairs option, right? So very famously, there's that seat on Singapore Airlines. I want to say there's a missing G seat in the middle. So it's 343 ABC GHJ. Yeah, well, anyway, the missing aisle seat, which is basically the trapdoor escape from the downstairs crew rest.
Just have a crew member just pop right up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of airlines have this. Delta, they did, but I don't know if they still are building their own for the A330, the A330neo, the Delta Flight Products business under Rick Salanitri. That's one of the things that they were building themselves, was their own little crew rest area. And the idea with this Safran thing was basically, to have some bunks downstairs that you could sell as in-flight use only for sleeping, whether that would be for... And the idea was probably that it was going to be for economy, right? Like the much delayed Air New Zealand Skynest, the $400 nap slab.
Nap slab.
Oh, yeah.
I love traveling by train.
John, that's a whole other podcast topic. We do not have time to get into that.
When the nap slab goes into effect.
We will absolutely have you back for that.
Fantastic.
Before we let you go, I would be remiss if I didn't mention who you are and what you're up to these days. You are now the editor-in-chief
he's
of
not John. He doesn't need introduction.
Well, he needs an introduction for a very specific reason. John has been gracious enough to reactivate the 24% discount code for Flight Radar 24 AvTalk podcast listeners. If you go to theupfront.media/FR24, you can take advantage of that. John Walton, it has been my absolute pleasure to speak to you about the A340-600 at length. Thank you so much for doing this, sir.
My absolute
John.
pleasure.
We'll have you back when we get to episode 1346.
Deal.
Welcome back. That was just fun. That was fun.
Every time we talk to John, I don't know how many times we talk to John, but I think it's usually pretty fun. But that was the most fun because this is definitely John's thing. If you know someone that knows more about the A340-600 than John Walton,
I just want to say we cut down the interview as well. I mean, it
can't be true.
We talked for a long time, and we don't usually cut down the interviews, but this one we had to shorten up just a bit. All right, let's get going with the rest of the show because there's still some more stuff to talk about. Air India is making its return to mainland China in February, beginning Delhi to Shanghai flights, and then Mumbai to Shanghai is coming later in 2026. This is kind of all happening at once. Thankfully, the two countries have decided that they're friendly enough that they can allow direct flights once again. So Indigo is on it, and Air India is on it. China Southern's on it. So we're seeing multiple airlines begin to operate flights between China and India.
This is good. Love to see it.
This next one affects maybe one or two listeners eventually, but it's important to have your privacy, Jason.
It is, especially on airplanes. I mean, I love private suites.
Right. I mean, who doesn't? This is United asking the FAA for an exemption to be able to install mini suites on its A321XLR, which are scheduled to debut next year, mid-year next year. And this would allow United to install doors, basically, though they're not actually doors. They're movable walls.
They're little flappy bits that look like doors. But I don't think this is unique to United. JetBlue has had some issue with this also, where for a while it had to, or it might still be doing this, where it had to lock its suite doors open because it didn't have enough flight attendants in the cabins.
You
and they
need
only
to have
realized that
an
at some
extra
point.
crew member to make sure that all of the doors on the suites are locked open during taxi, takeoff, and landing.
Yeah, this is a thing. We should have Seth Miller on to talk about this, who while John Walton is an expert in the A340-600, I think Seth Miller is an expert in airlines having to do weird things to install mini suites on their FAA-certified
He's our door
narrow
guy.
bodies. He's our door guy. That's a much more elegant way to put it. But it's
about
weird.
that.
When you do something as insignificant, you would think, as putting a suite door a business class seat. There are actually a lot of implications in getting that certified.
Especially with safe egress in the event of an emergency.
Yes, just ask Delta, who has not yet put its A321neos with fancy seats on board in service and won't for quite some time, it seems. This stuff is really complicated.
Yeah. Mesa shareholders have approved the merger with Republic Airways, which is really good news for Mesa because they are struggling financially.
Wait, have we talked about this before? I don't think I knew about
We
it.
had when they first proposed the merger. So earlier this year, shareholders late last month approved the merger, which is really good for Mesa and good for
episode
Republic too.
315.
There you
there
go.
it is, episode 315. I, for one, welcome our new Republic overlords, because when I fly my cursed route between Dulles and LaGuardia, sometimes I end up on Mesa aircraft. And when I end up on Mesa aircraft, I have a bad time. I have a less bad time at Republic aircraft, still a bad time. But it would be good if there was just this one regional airline to consolidate my badness
There you
on
go.
the cursed route.
And they will have a fleet of approximately 275 regional jets to provide capacity with.
That's nice.
This one is a bit close to my heart, given all the work that we've done on GPS jamming and spoofing over the past few years. Fokker Services says that its anti-jamming system will be ready at the beginning of 2026, launching with
Anti-jamming of what? You should probably clarify.
GPS jamming.
Ah, there you go. That's important.
Yeah, so no more jam on airplanes.
Jamming of everything, like the Spaceballs scene where the radar's jammed. I mean, Ian, you got to be specific.
I apologize. So this will launch on an unnamed airline early next year, they say. So we'll see which airline it comes out. Hopefully they'll let us know. But the system is available for the 737, 737 MAX, the 747-400, and the Dash 8. So sorry if you're operating other aircraft at the moment, but they do say they're working on making the system available for other aircraft families. So that'll be interesting to see.
I would love to talk to Fokker about how they're doing that and how this works. That will be super interesting to learn more, because this is a massive industry. Not even just an industry, kind of a global
It's
problem.
a global
This doesn't
problem.
just impact aviation.
Yeah, it does not just impact aviation. It arguably impacts other industries more because of the issues that GPS jamming and spoofing creates for them, especially other shipping industries and things like that. GPS jamming is certainly not great for aviation, but it's not necessarily directly impacting things, where in some other places there is a direct impact and businesses are directly impacted negatively. But it'll be really interesting to see how they do this. And they're not the only ones working on this. So we're seeing all sorts of avionics companies working on counter jamming and new technologies. But it seems like they're going to be one of the first to bring something to market. All right, Jason, we've come to the part of the show where we scurry through a bunch of very interesting and somewhat weird
the
topics.
speed run.
So let's do
Okay,
it.
let's go with a video KLM posted recently, or KLM City Hopper, I guess, posted recently. Behind the scenes video on the acceptance process of its 25th Embraer E195 E2, which I thought was just really cool because it's a longer video. Usually a lot of these are like 2.5 minutes long. This was pretty long, detailing everything that the airline has to do to take delivery of its new airplanes. And there were just a bunch of cool behind the scenes thing, like the culture clash between the Dutch and Brazilians. Would you know it that the Dutch and Brazilians are just culturally very different people, and how they've not just seen past that, but they've bonded and actually become really close. But I thought there was just this one quip at the end that was really cool where Embraer opened up a brand new basically conference room where you have your ceremonial handing over of the aircraft, and there's champagne and you pop the cork and you celebrate. KLM was the first user of this room, and when they popped the cork on a bottle of champagne, it shot through a ceiling tile. Brand new room, broke a ceiling tile, and the rep for KLM decided to take the ceiling tile, sign it with his name, and put the aircraft registration next to it. And apparently that has become tradition for every delivery of an Embraer aircraft. And there's some really cool screenshots of all the personalized notes and drawings and all these things for basically every aircraft for years it's been delivered from Embraer. And there's some interesting stuff up there. Not every aircraft is apparently delivered without, let's say, trial and error. Apparently there's one aircraft from Republic, November 763 Yankee X-Ray, appears multiple times on the ceiling tiles for apparently kicking their butts, but they kicked it back, says Troy. And apparently the struggles are real, says Chad, on the ceiling tiles. But I thought that was just a really, really cool thing to see behind the scenes that ordinarily we'd have no idea that some airplanes come from a manufacturer without any issues whatsoever. And some apparently are really, really difficult. And it just kind of puts it was just really wholesome to see that. We'll put a link to it in the show notes and give it a watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's worth a few moments of your time. Jason, normally when an airline's late, the most that happens is somebody gets upset. But every once in a while, there's a bit more...
Someone gets really upset.
There's a bit more consequence to it.
Yeah, apparently we're getting this from skynews.com. Ryanair was so habitually late on a few routes to the Netherlands that the Airport Coordination of Netherlands, ACNL, said, you know what? No, you're done, Ryanair. We're taking these routes away from you. And they actually removed 2 slots from Ryanair. Particularly, they were consistently late on Monday evening flights from Sofia, Bulgaria, apparently, and Thursday evening flights from Pisa, Italy, to the point where ACNL said, no, we're taking these slots back and you can't have it, even though it's just the flights are an average of more than an hour late, which I guess an average of more than an hour late, that's pretty high. I mean, I would love if my flight from Dulles was only an average of an hour late, but for Europe, that's not normal. But yeah, this is a rare move from the administrator of these slots to take away 2 slots. We do have rules in the US from the FAA about habitually late flights. There are fines, but taking away a slot, I don't think is something that really is it's a last case resort. But hey, it happens sometimes. Good for them.
When I fly, I wear a watch, Jason. I wear a watch all the time.
I have a scratched up Apple Watch.
But what I don't do is wear airline branded and themed A350 watch. Swiss wants to change that, though I'm not sure at this price point I'm going to be able to partake. Swiss has released a limited edition. It is limited to 350 pieces. It is a limited edition Breitling Navitimer B01 chronograph 46 Swiss limited edition. It will be available on board Swiss long-haul flights from December 1st and can also be pre-ordered at Swiss.com in the duty-free shopping section.
Tell us how much it costs.
Hold on, I'm gonna give the description first, and then we'll talk about how much it costs. Stainless steel case.
Oh, you got to tell the users why they want it before they buy it. Of course.
It's a Navitimer, so a fantastic watch, but a stainless steel case featuring black, chocolate, and beige dial, refined 18-karat rose gold details, accented with burgundy details reminiscent of the signature color of Swiss. Has a fluted bezel, an AOPA wing logo at 12 o'clock, paying tribute to the collection's aviation heritage, and the central chronograph is adorned with an airplane that appears to fly across the watch. You can buy one of these for actually the price is less than I thought it was going to be in in Swiss francs. It's only 8,350 Swiss francs, duty free.
Which comes out to about $10,500 USD plus VAT, which I'm sure adds quite a hefty bit to it. But you know what? You don't need to pay a single dime.
You sure don't.
For this, Ian. If you have 2,338,000 miles and more miles, this could be yours for free.
Yeah.
Yep. I do not recommend spending 2.38 million miles on a watch.
You should spend it on us. You should buy us tickets on the new Swiss census. That's why they're doing all this.
If this is your thing and you do buy this $10,491.93 USD watch plus VAT, of course, send us some pictures. I'd love to see it.
Absolutely. Speaking of Swiss's new A350, they've done the inaugural. We have a video on our YouTube channel of that, which included a go-around on the return back to Zurich from Palma de Mallorca. So that was cool. And we'll also have Gabe on the inaugural intercontinental flight, which is coming up in just a few days from Zurich to Boston to actually try out that new business class cabin and get a behind the scenes look at how Swiss does their A350 flights. So stay tuned for that. All right, Jason, there's some weird stuff going on in New York. Tell me what you got.
Well, the other day I heard a very loud helicopter, which is not out of the norm for New York. We have lots of loud helicopters, but this one in particular, I saw actually a reflection of it in the building across the street and said, what the heck was that? And it turned out to be a Sikorsky S6, which is a very large aircraft, but also bears a striking resemblance to Marine One.
Not an S6. Sorry, I should clarify.
A 61, and even more so, it bears a striking resemblance to Marine One when you paint it in Marine One livery.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you fly it around Brooklyn a whole bunch over the course of a bunch of days over the Brooklyn Bridge and land it actually in the Brooklyn Navy Yard a bunch of times, people start to ask questions and going, what is Marine One doing here in Brooklyn? And why is it hovering over the Brooklyn Bridge? And why is it taking off and landing a whole bunch right next to the BQE, which is a highway here in Brooklyn and Queens? It's an expressway. Turns out, don't actually know what exactly they were filming, but it was doing a lot of landing and taking off from Steiner Studios, which is a film studio here in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The aircraft is November 904 Charlie Hotel, which is actually moved on now through Mount Pocono and is somewhere in the middle of Michigan.
They're based in Michigan. The owner of the helicopters is based in Michigan. They do heavy helicopter work. They have Chinooks. I think they're the largest civilian operator at the S-61.
Yeah, and it just came out of Kingston, Jamaica, where I would imagine it was doing humanitarian work after the hurricane there, and then promptly stopped by West Palm Beach, Florida for a couple days on its way up to New York, where I assume it then got its Marine One livery, because it would be really weird if a helicopter was in Jamaica doing humanitarian work painted in Marine One livery. That'd be real weird. But if you see a helicopter that looks exactly like Marine One, it might not actually be Marine One. It might have just been that for filming whatever they were doing here in Brooklyn, because why not?
In 6 months to a year, we'll find out what that was all about.
And I will watch it.
But you don't have to wait 6 months to a year to find out what this is all about, because we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, this has been episode 346 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.